president in the very area in which he reports foreign policy.
But reporters don't want to be reporters anymore. Journalists don't want to just report the news. They want to run the government. And this is really a disease that runs all the way through Washington journalism, and you can say it happens in the conservative side too.
Well, look, so that my dogs in the fight are clear. When I was a straight-ahead reporter, I kept my opinion out of my stories, which surprisingly is not all that hard. People think it's a real trial. It's not. You look at your writing and you say, is this down the middle? Did I put both sides in, and did I keep my own opinion out? You keep certain words out, and you look at every sentence and consider, is there an opinion in there, or am I only stating facts with attribution to the people who made those statements, whether it was plus or minus on whatever issue it was? It wasn't that hard. And when I made the change to talk, it was easy to say, I'm now going to label myself as a talk show host, and you understand that you're going to get my opinion as well as facts. But you're right. This is one of those things that gets on the conservative side as well.
Well, but they would say, well, the lines are blurry, and especially, this guy has worked his time in Newsweek, and we all know how much time in Newsweek have just fallen away from the idea of reporting it. I mean, look at something like the earthquakes in Haiti. Newsweek didn't even send a human being to that. They sent a photographer, and they ran an essay by the president. So you could say the idea that Newsweek or Time are reporting anymore is a little bit dicey. But again, what part of the scandal in this, though, is basically that he's coming on CNN or writing for magazines, and it's sort of undisclosed that he's an informal advisor to the president, and that's where it becomes, a real ethical muddle, because they also had a big fit back in, '83, that George Will in the '80 campaign had advised Ronald Reagan, and then came out after the debate and said he performed like a thoroughbred, and they were all really angry because he hadn't really acknowledged his role with Reagan.
And there should be disclosure, and then the audience can make up its mind at the very minimum. I agree with you that if you're going to advise a president on the Middle East, then you shouldn't be reporting on foreign policy. The other one that occurs to me is, wasn't it Gwen Eiffel who had just finished a book? I think she worked for NPR radio, and she might have...
PBS.
Oh, sorry, PBS.
Yes, she wrote a book called The Breakthrough, and Obama was part of that.
Right. And then she moderated the debate. Yeah.
And then you tried to say the Obama part of the book wasn't done yet. Well, anybody who's written a book knows that if your book's slated for a January release, it's done. They have legal going over it, they're publishing it. If it's September and your book's coming out in January, it's done. You don't get to say, oh, I haven't written the Obama part yet.
And yet she was allowed to get away with it, wasn't she?
Sure, because, and again, that's because they wanted to have, a balanced set of moderators. And by that I mean racially balanced, and gender balanced. There's been a lot of controversy over not having enough racial and gender balance in these debate moderators, and so they keep picking Gwen Eiffel, who honestly I think is an extremely mediocre moderator. Some of the questions she asked us last time around were so incredibly lame, like asking Sarah Palin what she would do if McCain died. Questions and awkward and
why is that an unreasonable
cringe-inducing.
I mean, can you imagine?
Why is that an unreasonable question to ask of a fucking vice presidential candidate?
And I think they sort of...
It's unreasonable to ask a vice presidential candidate what they would do?
Dumb question.
What?
And really not very polite.
It's the only situation where she would take the presidency. It's the only situation where she matters. How could the one situation where she matters not fucking irrelevant?
PBS would be polite. The polite broadcasting service.
Exactly, in a monotone. So what happens at this point? Has anybody, your organization, Media Research Center, I'm talking to Tim Graham, by the way, Director of Media Analysis for the Media Research Center. Brent Bozell has demanded that CNN at least acknowledge this and maybe even ask that Zakaria be recused from covering those things. But then what would that leave him on?
Well, it's true. If he's very generic on foreign policy issues, what I would say is, yeah, he needs to clarify. Is he going to be an advisor to Obama? Is he going to be a journalist? You don't get to be this. I sneak into the White House and offer him advice.
Can you imagine how the perception of CNN's reporting would change if they just put a bug under? They always have the reporter name and title. Foreign policy. Chief Washington correspondent. Blah blah. If you put under it presidential advisor and CNN correspondent, how the perception of his reporting might change.
Well, and I suppose you could also argue that when he's being praised for his advising Obama by Eliot Spitzer, and Eliot Spitzer is now a host of a CNN program.
Which is amazing in and of itself.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. There is so much blur now between journalism, and CNN has pitched itself as, MSNBC's way over here and Fox is way over there, and we're the serious, sober people in the middle. And they've completely muddled it with these sorts of hires.
It's interesting. You just made me think of the fact. I don't particularly like Spitzer. I can honestly say, other than the screens being on the studio at the appropriate time, I've never actually watched the show. I've never bothered to TiVo it. I just think he's a despicable human being. But I'm kind of wondering now, is he going to be covering the French dude from the IMF? because I can't wait to hear Eliot Spitzer get all outraged at the idea that somebody might have sexually assaulted a woman or be accused of sexual assault, or maybe get his take on what it's like to face an accusation of some kind of sexual misdeed. I'm just wondering if the guy with a straight face can comment on any of it.
Sexual misdeeds in pricey hotels with Eliot Spitzer.
$1.60 cash back. If I could have those orders through the newspaper machine, I'd appreciate that.